Hey, I'm Bill Marion, and this is A Nose for Life. I have to do that intro all over again because I had it muted. I am still learning how to do this, folks. Please forgive me. I'm still learning how to do this. It's so different going live and going and recording and uploading. There's a whole bunch of other things that I have to do. Thank you for so much for your patience, and I do appreciate it so much. I'm still trying to figure things out, and it's just taking me one step at a time. So I do thank you. Today we're talking about the State of the Union again. In case you missed it, I'm Bill Marion, and this is A Dose for Life. Typically speaking, this is not the format that I was going to use for this channel ever. I was never going to do politics on this channel. As recently as last week, I said that we're not a political channel. But there's some things that have happened along the past 7 to 10 days that's made me reconsider. It's not that I want this to be a political pundit channel, because it's not, and it never will be. This channel is about living life and to the fullest extent, traveling and getting off the couch and pushing yourself to stay young in your mind, and battling the darkness that can come in with light. That's what this channel is all about. That's what it's dedicated to. It's not dedicated to political stuff, which can be dark and depressing and yuck. That's not what we want to do necessarily. But there have been some things that have happened over the past 10 days, 7 to 10 days, especially when it comes to media and the way the media, whether I hate the term mainstream media, but just media in general, and corporate controlled media is kind of handling the narrative right now. That if you have any kind of platform, I don't care what platform it is, a voice of reason has to come out. We have to discuss some things. We have to talk about some things, because it instead of things kind of smoothing out for the past few months, they just keep escalating and getting worse politically. And the turmoil that it's causing in the country, there needs to be more voices. We need to have more voices involved and discussing things. This is not intended at all to be political in this particular video is definitely not intended to be politically persuasive one way or the other. This is just to talk about the State of the Union and try to talk about it in honest and real sense, and get kind of a grasp of what's really going on. And as we talk about this, some things are going to surface automatically, and that's what we can expect from President Trump in the State of the Union, what we can expect him to say, what we can expect him to kind of say, okay, this is where we're at right now and how we're going forward, and what we can expect everybody else to say. And we can kind of know ahead of time what's going on, and to talk about some of the problems that are going to happen. It's just so obvious. It's right here. And we need to talk about that and maybe offer an olive branch to some people in our circles, but also, and this is so important, is to get out of our echo chambers and start talking, not trolling, but talking. And that's going to become more and more important if we want to see the country kind of smooth out and get rid of all this division. Now, there's always going to be a little division. There's always going to be political discourse. That's a part of what this country is. Even the Bible says iron sharpens iron. It takes the clash of opinions in order to create the awesome country that we have. But right now, we're just the fever is just way up here. I would say it's worse now than it was even during the election, and we'll get into that and talk about it. Again, I want to thank you for checking this channel out. I really do appreciate it. Typically, we are a travel channel, kind of. We talk about some serious things every now and then, but typically it's just a lighthearted channel. But I'm so thankful and grateful that you're watching. Live streaming is something that we're going to be doing a lot of. What I'd like to do when we're re-verified through YouTube is spin what we do live off onto another channel and do something that way. For right now, we have to keep it all on one channel. It just makes a lot more sense to do it that way. So thank you so much for watching. And also, because of the new algorithm with YouTube and their new policies, it is so important that if you're not a subscriber to our channel, that you'll consider subscribing. If you like this video, I'd encourage you to watch some of our other videos too, because this isn't exactly what we do with our channel, but I would encourage you to watch some of our other videos. But I hope that you'll subscribe. And if you're already a subscriber, I really encourage you to share one of your favorite A Nose for Life videos on your Facebook page, because that is the only way that this channel the only way it grows is when people share it. So our subscribers that we have right now, thank you. If you're a subscriber, the only reason why we have the subscribers that we have right now is because people like you have shared it on their Facebook page, their Twitter, or whatever the case is. And if you don't want to share a political video on Facebook, I don't blame you, because that can cause all kinds of problems. Then share one of our other videos. We have a video that's doing really well right now. It's called the 10 Crazy Facts About the State of Arizona. My wife Carolyn and I were out in Arizona last month, or not last month, but in May, for terrible reasons, just awful, terrible reasons. And I won't get into that here. It's very personal, but I'll tell you something. The state of Arizona, the people just were amazing, and one of the most breathtaking states that's out there. We were out there. We had to be out there for about 8 days, and we were kind of trapped. We were kind of trapped in the situation. All we could do is kind of just drive around aimlessly, waiting for phone calls. I mean, going from one appointment, then we'd have 3 days to another appointment, and so we were out there just kind of driving around aimlessly. That's all we could do, but it was just absolutely breathtaking. So I put a video up called 10 Crazy Facts About Arizona. You want to check that out, you can share that video on your Facebook. So let's talk about the State of the Union address. The State of the Union is the coolest thing to me as far as the traditions behind it. I love the traditions behind the State of the Union. It's really cool. It's a joint session of Congress, and here comes the president. He comes out there, and they announce him. They're like, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States," and then everybody starts clapping, and they clap for like 2 hours or something, and everybody's like cheering, and then it's just crazy. It's just a lot of pomp and circumstance behind it. But here's the funny part, is that you would think that we would have always had a State of the Union address, and it's not true at all. We've always had a State of the Union report, but up until Woodrow Wilson, the State of the Union address was provided like by letter. The president would just write a letter outlining his agenda, and that's how he got the word out. But when Woodrow Wilson comes around back in 1913, he had a lot of stuff to sell the American people. So having a State of the Union address was the president's way, President Woodrow Wilson's way of selling his agenda to the American people. Back then it was all about bank reform, and we were trying to avoid the war in Europe. Didn't work out to us too well. But Woodrow Wilson is the first one to actually set up this kind of pomp and circumstance, and we've been doing it ever since, having the State of the Union address, and that was started in 1913. And like I said, it's a lot of tradition and a lot of old school stuff that's a lot of fun. State of the Union addresses, they usually fall along, obviously, political lines. Even when presidents try to reach across the aisle and offer the opposing party, sort of an olive branch, it doesn't usually work out well for them. And these days, the press will get a copy of the speech, long before the speech is ever given. So will the opposition party. And so there's a response that the Democrats give after and it would be the Democrats if the Republicans are in office, the Republicans if the Democrats are in office. There's a response that's given to what the president says. And that's kind of cool too, because everybody gets to have a little bit of say. And this year, a lot of other people are going to have a say. We'll talk about that as well. A lot of people are going to be jumping in after the president's address or before to give their opinion and their point of view. So it's kind of a big deal, especially this year. And it's not a matter of being addicted to drama, but this year more than any year, our president needs to do a pretty good job at trying to reach as far as he can across the aisle and make friends. Because right now we are just incredibly divided. So what is the State of the Union? The State of the Union is essentially a constitutional requirement of the president to provide his agenda annually to Congress. And so this is the way that we do that in the 21st century here, is he gets in front of Congress, he gets in front of the cameras and tells everybody what's up. What we have to keep in mind with this is that, and this is important, is that President Trump has given a speech with the lowest approval rating of any president in his first year in the history of presidential polling. That weighs heavy on this crowd. It really does. I mean, as people are watching, you have to realize that the approval ratings are low, and it's not just the approval ratings, but it's that his own party is kind of in disarray as far as whether or not they like him or they don't like him. So it's not exactly going to be an easy time for President Trump. And before you can talk about the State of the Union and try to say where he's going to go with this and where other people are going to go with this, let's look at the State of the Union. And the first thing you look at is the economy. And how does the economy? Well, it's really, really good according to everyone. 2017 ended well, and the fourth quarter, there was a little bit of slowdown in the fourth quarter, but overall, it was a great year. By the way, let me say this: especially if you're watching this on the repeat, there are multiple links in the description from both sides, both political parties, both whether the media is leading this way or this way. There are plenty of links in the description that will provide most of the information that I have here in what I've got to say today, most if not all. So be sure to check out those links in the description. An ABC Washington poll said that nearly 6 out of 10 Americans describe the economy as excellent or good. And so that's the most positive ratings that the public have given the president in 17 years. So that's pretty impressive right there. But only 38% of the 6 out of 10 said that President Trump was largely responsible for the country's economic health. And 50% gave more credit to the former president, President Barack Obama. And again, I know that surveys can lean politically one way or the other. I mean, you've got your Democrats, you get your Democrat media, your liberal media, your conservative media, but you can still get a good sense of where people are at with some of these polls. You can get a really good sense. And what I would encourage, what this post is really all about, is to kind of get out of our echo chambers and see what other people are thinking. And there's a lot of people who they accept that the economy is doing great, but they don't give President Trump credit for it because he just got in the White House. And of course, we've had President Obama over the past year. We're going to kind of address that to see which way that could go, and it really could go one way or the other. The unemployment rate is at a 4.1%. The unemployment rate has been dropping over the past several years. For several years, the unemployment rate has been dropping. Here's the thing with the unemployment rate. They readjusted the way we calculate the unemployment rate. So that kind of changes my overall opinion about the unemployment rate and how good or how bad that is, because if we're definitely dealing with different numbers than we were, or a different equation than we were 10 years ago or 11 years ago. So, but it's lower now than it has been at 4.1%. President Trump states that that his administration has helped to create 500,000 jobs in manufacturing and in mining industries. Bottom line is that number is probably more like 300,000 at best. There may have been just a little bit of either embellishment or taking credit for some jobs that came in that didn't have anything to do with the Trump administration. Every president does that. Every president, they're going to look at it, they're going to blow their own numbers up. They all do. But nevertheless, a lot of jobs were created. A lot of jobs. And in manufacturing and mining alone, we know for a fact that over 200,000 jobs were created. That's for sure. The stock market finished out at 27% higher, 27% growth in 2017, which is just phenomenal. I mean, it was just rolling. If President Trump had anything to do with anything, it's definitely the stock market, because, hey, when you cut taxes and set a precedent at cutting taxes for corporations, and you're definitely, the stock market's going to roar because they reinvest that money. So the stock market is definitely roaring. If you have a 401k, if you're in the market, and we're in the market, your stocks, you're doing great right now. You're doing phenomenal. Economic growth also slowed in the final months of 2017. What that spells out for 2018, no one knows just yet. All of this economic growth that we've had in 2017 is because of the global recovery, in which major markets around the world are expanding simultaneously for the first time in years. And so that's especially helpful to export-oriented manufacturing. So U.S. factories added nearly 200,000 jobs in 2017, the strongest showing since 2014. So essentially, everybody in the world is doing really well right now, and the U.S. is kind of benefiting from it. And so we had a stellar year in 2017, and it looks as though we could continue that trend in 2018. The New York Times said that preliminary estimates released by the government on Friday showed that the nation's output increased at an annual rate of 2.6% in the final quarter of 2017. And that performance amounts to less than the 4% annual growth that the president has promised, but it's further evidence, along with a sinking jobless rate and surging consumer confidence, of the economy's resilience. Every time they say economy's resilience, they don't realize, it wasn't exactly resilient. It didn't bounce back quickly. It took the economy quite a while to bounce back, and for some people, it still hasn't bounced back. 3% growth might be difficult for the economy in 2018. So when you talk about the State of the Union, we're doing well, but we need to do better as far as financially, as far as the economic sector. What Trump will focus on in the State of the Union is financial success of 2017. He can claim credit and not be wrong. A lot of presidents who've come into a good situation, things are roaring, they take credit, and it's not, they didn't do anything to deserve the credit. Trump does to an extent, and because he does to an extent, because he deserves some credit, or he knows that the tax plan, he was a billionaire before he became the president. He can take a little bit of credit for that, and because he can take a little credit, he can take a lot of credit, and he could run with that. So you're going to hear a lot about the economy. Now, the dollar, this is what you're going to be hearing over the next several months. What Democrats are going to say is that the dollar is falling. Now, this is interesting because you're not hearing a whole lot about this right now unless you are around economic talk all the time. You're not going to hear a whole lot about this in the news right now, but you will over the next several months because Democrats, for their agenda and for them to kind of chip away at President Trump's claiming success for the economy, they're going to point to an odd thing that's taking place right now, and that the dollar's falling when really it should be going up. And let's talk about a strong dollar versus a weak dollar just real quick. A strong dollar, what does that mean to a consumer? A strong dollar means that our currency buys more of a foreign country's goods, and this can be for consumers and intentional travelers because if you want to buy anything that's imported from another country, you can buy more with less money. But there's a pretty big downside. A strong dollar means that U.S. companies are at a disadvantage, forcing American companies a lot of times to move out of the U.S. if the dollar stays strong for too long. A weak dollar means that a consumer can buy less from a foreign country, and that's a pretty big deal when you realize how many things that we buy here in America that are made in other countries. If they're manufactured in other countries and the dollar is weak, the consumer, the individual, the average countryman here in the U.S. is paying more money for it, and their labor isn't being rewarded as much. So you're working the same amount of time, but your dollar doesn't go as far. And so some people argue that a weak dollar is good for jobs and the job market overall. Other people argue that if you always want a strong dollar, that the dollar should be strong for the consumer and for individuals, and that overall makes us healthy. Here's what I've learned. I'm 43, and I'm not an economist. I don't claim to be an economist. The dollar swings back and forth. Typically, I would prefer the dollar to stay strong. That's just my personal opinion. But, man, theories on that and opinions on that are all over the place. Again, I got some links in the description below about a strong and a weak dollar. And, hey, where do you stand? Let me know in the comments whether or not you think the dollar should be strong or weak. And this is going to be a big deal because the dollar's been falling for about a year. And it really shouldn't be, because even though the U.S. stock market is rocking and rolling, global investors are looking for opportunities outside of the U.S. They've been doing this for about a year in spite of the Fed's policy of changes that would cause us to believe that the value of the dollar compared to other currencies should be increasing. And is this a good or bad thing? And I don't know. I guess that my opinion is that money moves. Money just moves. Currencies fluctuate. A fluctuating currency is probably the most healthy way of looking at it. The currencies go up and down. That's just kind of a part of the economy. But really right now, with the Feds raising interest rates, the dollar should be growing, but it's not. But that's probably because investors are putting money in global markets right now and not just here in the U.S. But like I said, I'd love to hear what you think about the falling dollar. But here's the thing. You're going to be hearing a lot more about this in the coming months from Democrats as they oppose President Trump and his economic agenda. You're going to be hearing a whole lot about this, about the falling dollar, if it continues to fall. And I suspect that it's possible that it will continue to fall. So you'll hear President Trump tonight taking a lot of credit for the economy. That over the next several months, you'll hear Democrats say, hey, he's got to do something about the dollar. He's failing to sustain the dollar, and that's bad for the working class. So you'll hear that over the next several months. The bottom line is where we really need to pay attention to right now, considering what we've come out of in 2008, the financial crash that we had, the crisis that we had, is right now we really need to focus on jobs. That's where everybody's focused right now. So the second thing that President Trump tonight or tomorrow night will talk about is the stock market rolling. But a lot of people are asking, is this just a big bubble, a credit bubble? Everyone's giving President most of the credit because of the tax cut. But my question that I would have, as you know, to be an in-house critic, so to speak, is: Are President Trump's tax cut a good or bad thing in the long run? Historically, historically, Republicans are really, really good at cutting taxes. We can cut some taxes, but we're really terrible at cutting the budget. And if you need any type of source on that, just inbox me and I'll send you $1 billion. Republicans can slash a budget and or can cut taxes, but can't slash a budget. And if you're going to give massive tax breaks, you have to cut the budget. And I'm not hearing anything about the budget being trimmed at all. In fact, I'm hearing about an infrastructure plan that people are pitching of $1 trillion. Now, that's I only found that on two sources last night, but we do need infrastructure. Right now, our infrastructure here in the United States is probably as bad as it's been since the turn of the 20th century. No, I'm not exaggerating. I've got a link in the description on that too. But listen, that'll start you down a rabbit hole. Hit that link about our American infrastructure, where it's at right now, and then just go a surfing. Go a surfing on the worldwide interweb and have a blast at finding out how bad our infrastructure really is. What a bad infrastructure means for the individual. Because we hear all these terms, but a lot of times we forget to put them down to what does it mean for the individual. What it means is that your insurance starts going up because traffic accidents begin to increase the worse the infrastructure get. It's a vicious, vicious cycle, and that's it. Our infrastructure is terrible. We need to do something, but we've given these enormous tax breaks out, these huge tax breaks, and they're the biggest in history. And so, how are we going to possibly cut the budget to adjust for the tax breaks that we've given, and then raise $1 trillion for infrastructure? Some people have suggested a mix of the private sector and the public sector coming together for infrastructure. Um, Good luck with that. I would love to see that work, but usually that means more money that the American individual, the people, have to pay in the long run. Our best road work that we've ever done in the past, since we've been a country, some of our best road work was the Eisenhower road system, the Eisenhower Network road system that was Interstate 75, 40, and I could go on, that connected the country in such a way that our economy just exploded. It was just amazing what happened after we started building these super highways. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. The government did that. The government, created that. There's some things that it's probably best to leave the government to do, even though it takes them a long time and we overpay for it. It's just that when we've left corporations to do certain things, they're corporations by their nature. It's their job to make a profit. That's what they do. And sometimes profit outweighs safety. Sometimes profit outweighs taking care of the American worker. And so you have to keep an eye on that kind of stuff. And again, I'm trying to be as objective as I can here. As far as the way people are going to view the State of the Union tonight from different political aisles. Something that I'm not sure if President Trump is going to mention this tonight or not, but he should, because of it's happening right now. The North American, the NAFTA. NAFTA is I absolutely despise NAFTA. It's a trade agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And we came up with NAFTA in response to the euro way back in the Clinton administration. NAFTA essentially caused I don't know how many jobs to go to Mexico, and it was supposed to even assist with the immigration crisis that we were having then. It didn't. It didn't change anything. It has been terrible for this country. President Trump wants to renegotiate NAFTA. And of course, Mexico and Canada have rejected the proposal by the Trump administration, to remake a corporate arbitration system. That is a key part of the North American Free Trade Agreement, according to the people involved in the talks to update the pact. So NAFTA, President Trump is wanting to renegotiate NAFTA. Mexico and Canada, they're rejecting that. So that's a really big deal. I don't know if President Trump will address that tonight or tomorrow night in his. I keep saying that. I keep saying tonight, but it's tomorrow night. I don't know if President Trump will mention that in a speech or not. But that's as far as this is the State of the Union. That's definitely where we're at right now as a country. That's a very big deal because of how many millions of jobs were lost to Mexico. Are those jobs coming back? Some of those jobs have already come back. Boy, I'm having a hard time talking today. Some of those jobs have come back. And whether or not Trump is going to be able to do anything about NAFTA, he should be able to, but we'll see. What we could also expect from President Trump tonight is the idea of resetting the clock. The idea of resetting the clock to do something different in the uh, than to cause the division that's often caused when he fires out a tweet at 5 a.m. or 2 a.m. or whatever. He's what everybody's saying is that he's going to try to tone down the rhetoric. Here's what I've seen so far about President Trump is that there is no toning down the rhetoric. He's going to say what he wants to say. He might give a great speech. I'm sure he will. He did a great, the last time he addressed Congress, he was amazing. But people are pretty upset with President Trump and pretty angry about some things. So whether or not he's successful at a reset button, I honestly don't think that he'll have that much of success because he's already been set up for failure. Some would argue he's already set himself up for failure. That's not being mean, that's being honest. But the Democratic rebuttal this year will be given by Representative Joe Kennedy. Now let's talk about the Democratic rebuttal, or just the rebuttal in general. It's really funny because Democrats in general are terrible at giving a rebuttal. They're terrible. They usually mess it up. Republicans, they mess it up too a lot. I remember Mark Rubio. I know if you love him or hate him, Mark Rubio, he has this famous bottle of water that he drank during the rebuttal one year because he was very dehydrated. And even President Trump gave him a hard time during the campaign about it. But he kind of lived for people to forget. I had forgotten all about it until I was looking this stuff up last night. And then I remembered him doing that and going, oh, Mark. But rebuttals can go either way. And sometimes people just mess them up. But the Democratic rebuttal will be given by Republican Joe Kennedy. Yes, out of the Kennedy family. This is what... let me see. I want to make sure I've got this right. John Farrell from Politico, and Politico has been accused of being conservative and liberal. So Politico, wherever you stand about your opinion about Politico, I think that John Farrell is probably one of the most gifted writers. No, I don't agree with him on everything he says. Of course not. But he is just a gifted writer. But this is what he has to say about Joe Kennedy. He said, Representative Joe Kennedy III is not so well known. He's regarded both in Massachusetts and on Capitol Hill as an earnest and talented young man who, from all outward appearances, has walked through the minefields of political life, toting that famous name without forfeiting efficacy and rectitude or idealism. I think that's just a beautiful sentence, and I wanted to read it. It's really well written. Joe Kennedy he's quiet. He doesn't have the same type of demeanor that any of the Kennedy brothers had, like John and Bobby and the rest of them. He doesn't have the same kind of demeanor. He had, when you look at Joe Kennedy, he has this earnest, hardworking white man kind of thing from the Northeast going on. And he's scary. If you're a Republican, Joe Kennedy, you need to write that name down because I don't think he's going anywhere, and I think this is his moment to see if he could possibly break out on the scene. Seriously, write the name down. The fact that they've gotten together and asked Joe to do this is pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting. I don't even know. I've never seen it, but the more I read last night, the more I started reading between the lines, and I think they're kind of grooming him maybe for something down the road. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does tomorrow night with the rebuttal. But you can expect him again. He might talk about the falling dollar, but he's going to talk about DACA. He's going to talk about immigration, which I don't want to go into a great deal today, but he's going to talk about those things. As far as the State of the Union concerned, a lot of people would argue, though, that immigration is an issue. Some people don't. And I'm mixed on where I'm honestly don't know where I stand on the immigration thing on a personal note because I've always been pro-immigration. It's very difficult for me to get in line, so to speak, with the agenda on this. What I will say is that enough people are concerned about immigration that my fellow Americans have a security issue, and if they feel that there is a security issue, then I tend to lean that direction towards the Americans that feel threatened. But I would say that about any group of people here in America, when there are people that feel threatened and unsafe for whatever reason, whether it's they feel unsafe in the inner cities because they feel threatened from their local police departments, or whether they feel threatened because of their color. That is a reason for me to take note and a reason for me to say, hey, let's see what's going on here. And that's what we're going to get into here in a minute about getting out of echo chambers and start listening to other people. Because, again, just like with my brothers, my American brothers and sisters who they feel unsafe and they're worried about immigration, where it hasn't been something that's been on my radar. I've always been that Neil Diamond, we're coming to America. I've always been that guy. But a lot of my friends, relatives, and countrymen are concerned. And so I have to pause for a moment and give them a chance to express that and for us to respond to their needs. The People's State of the Union. Ever heard of that? The People's State of the Union? Well, that's tonight. Mark Ruffalo, he's an Avenger. Lee Daniels and Michael Moore. You might remember him from Fahrenheit 9/11 propaganda film that has been proven over and over again to be more false than accurate. And Whoopi Goldberg, you might remember her from such movies as Ghost. They are leading, are helping to lead a People's State of the Union, and the event's planned for tonight. And of course, that's the day before Trump's speech, and it's at a town hall. It's an historic venue in Manhattan, founded as a meeting spot for the women's suffrage movement more than 90 years ago. And it's an anti-Trump stump, and they're calling it, again, the People's State of the Union. And this is where I want to kind of focus the last 30 minutes, is this resistance, anger, rage thing that's happening right now. And I want to fully admit, and without any hesitation, that I think President Trump at times brings this on himself. It's unfortunate. I wish he didn't, but I wish he would. I wish he'd give somebody his phone and would just wait. I have to do that with Facebook. When people post stuff from both sides of the aisle, whether it's my liberal friends or whether it's my conservative friends and mentors, sometimes I've had to block people because they're political nonsense. And again, on both sides of the aisle, because I want to say, why do you think you know something about? Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about here. The NFL thing recently, I made a comment about the NFL kneeling thing, which is like, hey, just enjoy the game. Why are you worried about all the sideshow? Why are we worried about that? My goodness, you would have thought that I had made a threat to puppies or something. I don't know, but I mean, people just came out and swung left and right. But as far as the members of the NFL, taking a knee during the national anthem, you thought I was crazy. So I definitely understand how hard it is sometimes to shut up on social media. It's hard, when you're posting something on Facebook, on Twitter, or Instagram, and you want to express yourself. One of the reasons why I'm having to express myself now on YouTube, though, is because we are being forced to be quiet or get penalized with the type of videos we upload or what we watch on YouTube. And so as an American, I have to stand up and say, no, I'm not an extreme conservative. I'm not an extreme Democrat. I'm a moderate, voting for the best person who's running for office. And with a political background, I know a little bit about politics. I know a little bit about the economy. I've got an education. But if you watch certain brands of media right now, alternative media, or if you watch conservative media right now, even if you watch a plethora of what you would call liberal media, you're kind of getting pegged right now into a certain position. And I resent that. Somebody has to stand up with a voice. I say everybody stand up with a voice. And I'll say this to my Democrat friends, to my liberal friends, some who will watch this in its repeat. You've got to take up for all of us right now, because it could be you in 10 years, okay? Because these things switch, and corporate media tends to switch where the money is best for them. And so if you're smart right now, you will stand up for alternate media, but that's not what's going to happen. And when the shoe is on the other foot, I dare say conservatives will not stand up for liberal media. That's something that's got to stop. We have to understand that freedom of speech is the premise that makes this country work. You start with that. You start with the ability to come to the table, bringing freedom of speech. Hey, and this whole thing about false facts and false narrative, that's propaganda. Let people bring false facts to the table all they want to. Let them bring fake news. Let them bring whatever the case is, because at the end of the day, people will gravitate. It takes a while when you have a new media, when you have new media form. It takes a while for people to go, okay, that's fake news. I'm going to go over here. But restricting it just makes it louder. Restricting it just makes it louder. And what you're doing is restricting people who it may not be fake news. It's just a different opinion. It's a different perspective. And when you silence everybody, and when you put a different perspective in the same category as fake news, all you're doing is making this different perspective militant. and angry and wanting to be louder. And so I would say this to all of my liberal friends and anybody who's watching right now, Google, YouTube, people who are silencing. And I don't think my conservative friends realize to the extent that this is going on. And that embarrasses me, and I'll go into that some other time. But when you hamper people from having their expression outside of their echo chambers and trying to get their message out, all you do is make them stronger, and you're putting your own message in jeopardy. And we're going to talk about echo chambers in just a second. But the People's State of the Union tonight, I'll tell you what, the problem that I'm having with it is that it's called the People's State of the Union. I think it's great that people get together and want to voice their political opinions even when I don't agree. That's what this country is all about. So I say to Mark Ruffalo, the Avenger, and Lee Daniels, Michael Moore, Whoopi Goldberg. And by the way, Michael Moore, though, did predict a President Trump to win the White House. I watched that several times. He predicted it over and over again, and he was right. He was absolutely right, to the extent that President Trump's campaign team actually played some of Michael Moore's stuff. It was pretty funny. Michael Moore's entertaining, though, and he's a really nice guy. From what I hear, that he can be a really nice guy. So I don't want to be too mean about him, but he's definitely liberal. He definitely hates President Trump. He says some very, very hateful and angry things about our president. We're living in an odd time where people feel like, and this happened, and I will hold conservatives to the fire on this. This happened with President Obama too, where people feel like they can say whatever they want to about the president, and they can because of freedom of speech. But when you start getting into some very negative, personal, vile things and start hurling those things out into the media, it can be misinterpreted, and I don't think it's what's best for your cause. I know that I tried my best to stay away from that type of language about President Obama. I know I stayed away from it because he's the president. And I didn't vote for President Obama, but he was the president. And I remember on a blog that I used to do way back, it was called 3 a.m. Ministries. And I did it with James Marler, a good friend of mine. We did it back in 2008, right when President Obama was elected. I remember saying it then, and I say it now. And it's been a long time ago. But I said, I'm not going to badmouth this guy. He's not even been in office yet. I'm going to pray for him. And we got to be careful how we talk about our leadership. I mean, even if you can't stand the person who's in there, but conservatives, that goes to you too. Because I heard some of my closest friends and family in public say some things that were just evil about President Obama. They were insulting. It wasn't about his agenda. It was about him personally. And then you start crossing that line, because that's what's happening now with President Trump. So conservatives are just as guilty in that as liberals are. And so, when we talk about what is the State of the Union right now, division. That is a part of the state of our union that we have to address as individuals. I don't know how much President Trump can get done in this situation. I don't know how much Congress is going to get done when it comes to extending the olive branch across the aisle. I don't know what they're capable of doing, but I'll tell you what we can do as individuals. We can leave our echo chambers and start engaging other people across the political aisles and begin to talk to them as human beings instead of insulting them and being cruel to them. The anti-Trump stump tonight is mislabeled as a People's State of the Union, and let's talk about this. And if you're a Democrat, if you're a liberal, please just entertain me for a few more minutes here and listen to some of the things that I have to say about why this is not the best idea. In 2016, there were 200 million voters that were registered and eligible to vote. 60% of the 200,000 voted. That's a great voter turnout for any election in the past couple of decades. That's a great voter turnout. When especially if you compare it to the past 3 elections, presidential elections, it's a pretty good turnout. And here's how it went down. Hillary Clinton won 65.8 million of the votes. President Trump won 62.9 million. So yes, Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote by 3 million out of 127 million voters. That's not a whole lot. And for some reason, that's being carried around like she destroyed him in the election, and her agenda has the mandate. There is absolutely no truth to that. President Trump was not elected with a mandate. He wasn't. He was elected and should have been very humbled when he came to the office and realizing that he made it because of the Electoral College, which I believe in, but also that that more people voted for his opponent than they did him. So while he doesn't have a mandate, neither do these resistance people and people that believe that President Trump should get ran out of office. The truth is that it was split right down the middle of the people who voted, and the idea that you're going to call this the people's The People's State of the Union, what people? You're representing 65.8 million people, according to the last election. Now, they're going to argue it's more, that there were a lot of people who didn't vote. But like everybody says, if you didn't vote, you don't get a say in what's happened. So this is not a people's response, because they're not representing me. They're representing 65 million people that voted for Hillary Clinton. So I resent the fact that that's being branded as a people's response. No, it's not a people's response. It's 65 million people response, and there's 350 million people in America. So that, to me, there's a little bit of just silliness there that gets old. I get tired of hearing from Hollywood. I want to say, just act, just be in movies, just be in movies and do the movie thing, because I really don't want to hear about your politics. But they want to chime in on everything now. And weak-minded people, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, tend to fall for it, and it's really old. Last night at the Grammys, Hillary Clinton gets up and begins reading from the book Fire and Fury. The energy that's being placed in Hollywood into this anti-Trump movement and the resistance movement, or whatever the case is a big deal. It is a big deal, and that's what we're going to talk about here, the final stretch, which is the echo chamber warning for everyone in the State of the Union. If you're a Trump voter or a Trump supporter, a lot of Trump supporters and people who you may not fully support his agenda, but you voted for him, they're blinded by the 2016 election, and they don't realize what's taking place right now, and the momentum behind the resistance movement and the momentum behind the anti-Trump movement. A lot of them are clueless. And they're sitting back and they're saying, well, we won that, and kind of patting themselves on the back, and they think the war's over and that's it. Not realizing that it really just got started. What essentially has happened now is that millions of people have been mobilized to the cause that were kind of apathetic during the last election. And so if you're in a Trump echo chamber right now and you're kind of sitting back and thinking, hey, the economy's great, there's no way that our guy is going to lose, you're dead wrong. You're absolutely wrong. Trump voters are blind right now by the 2016 election, and they're not paying attention to the political landscape right now and what's being said. And Democrats, in their echo chambers, they are blinded by rage. They are blinded by rage. They're drunk with rage. And so I would say that Trump voters are blinded by the election that Trump barely won, and Democrats are blinded by an unwarranted rage that just isn't necessary. Now, I'm quoting David Marcus here from The Federalist. A Trump supporter is not synonymous with Republican. So if you're in an echo chamber and you're a conservative right now, number one, if your thinking is that the Republicans and some independents have rallied behind President Trump and they're giving him they're giving him their absolute best in support, that's not the case. There is a huge divide between Republicans and Trump supporters. Trump supporter is not the same as being a Republican. There are a lot of Republicans who did not vote for Donald Trump. There are a lot of Republicans who half-heartedly voted for Trump. There are a lot of Republicans who didn't vote at all because of Donald Trump. And this is going to hurt Republicans and conservatives this fall unless there is a narrative change quickly by the Republican Party. But number two, for Democrats in their echo chambers, the price Democrats or the resistance movement pays for having the all-court press, so to speak, putting their pressure on the president and their constant insults and remarks towards Trump supporters, are pushing away people who may not like President Trump because they hate fighting and division, but they are taking away their thunder because people like that don't necessarily like the fighting and the insults being hurled by Democrats. And so it's self-defeating. And Democrats need to remember there are a lot of Republicans who don't like President Trump, but as the hatefulness continues, Republicans are becoming more attached to President Trump. So as time goes on, even though there are divisions between Republicans and Trump supporters, the more hatred and the more anger and the more vile that's being poured out onto conservatives and Republicans, even through the media, even through demonetizing YouTube channels just because they happen to support some conservative views and some conservative viewpoints, what it's doing is it is empowering Trump voters. It's making them stronger. It's making them the echo chamber is growing. So there's no interchange between Trump supporters and people across the aisle. So it's counterintuitive. It's counterproductive to your own cause. So if you're a Democrat watching this, I want to thank you so much for watching this and being patient, being willing to listen and talk. And I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. But you have to understand, I'm surrounded by people who voted for President Trump for different reasons, and many of them weren't comfortable voting for President Trump last year. But trust me, now they are becoming more and more loyal to President Trump because of the actions of the Democrat Party, the liberals, and this resistance movement. So, in other words, people that didn't like him to begin with, they're starting to gravitate more and more towards him because they hate what's happening in Hollywood. It's disgusting to them, and it may be counterproductive for Democrats to stay on this course of thinking. Number three, the resistance movement is creating a rather successful narrative that Trump supporters are fascist, racist, entitled, and exclusive. This is an extraordinarily divisive strategy, and it isn't meant to convince people who voted for Trump to change their minds, because it's the exact opposite is happening. It's meant to mobilize voters this coming fall at the midterm elections. And folks, if you're in a Republican or conservative echo chamber, and if you don't think what's taking place is to an extent very successful for Democrats in the short term, you're wrong. They have a lot of momentum right now, a whole lot of momentum, and they're gaining supporters, and they've definitely galvanized their base. Democrats won't be successful, as they can be, though. This is number four, in the midterms, just based on their hatred of Donald Trump. There's no doubt in my mind that with the momentum that the Democrats have right now, unless a bombshell is dropped, unless something huge happens, which that's always possible, the Republicans and conservatives are going to lose some seats this fall. That's going to happen, okay? That happens. It happened with Barack Obama twice. It happens all the time. But here's the big issue is that if Democrats want to see success, they're going to have something more than Trump hate. That's not going to get them the seats that they want. It's not. It's only going to get them a few, but it's not. They're not going to have as much success. The rhetoric, the hate rhetoric, the vile rhetoric needs to stop for their own cause. It seems right now that the only platform that Democrats are marketing right now is the anti-Trump platform. And yes, you're going to win a lot of seats, but you won't win as many as they could if it weren't for all the hate. Yes, Hillary Clinton, this is number five. She won the popular vote, but don't let your echo chamber convince you that it wasn't a close election. It was a very close election. 3 million votes is nothing. I've seen so many websites talk about how Hillary Clinton had this huge margin of victory. No, she really didn't. It was tiny. It was a minuscule margin of the popular vote, a minuscule margin. So Trump doesn't have what you call a mandate, but neither does the opposition or the resistance. So the idea that somehow your cause as a Democrat is so big because she won the popular vote, that's your echo chamber talking. That is your echo chamber talking. That is not reality speaking. And you need to realize that both parties need to humble themselves and realize that neither one of them had the trust of the American people. I'm going to say that again because this has been the most difficult live stream I've done yet. I've had the hardest time talking and scrambling over my words during this stream. But if you think, whatever political party that you are, if you think that somehow your party is superior and you don't look at the facts that the country was divided right down the middle this past election, humility is in order for both parties. And that's the most disgusting part, is to see how arrogant both Democrats and Republicans are right now. That, whether you're a Trump supporter, you love Nancy Pelosi, whoever, is how arrogant these parties are to think that their way is the right way and everybody else, they're just wrong. Number six, the war and narrative shaping that the corporate media and mainstream that corporate and mainstream media are waging against alternate news, conservative-leaning news, is not having the effect it was intended to have. This particular video right now, the live stream, hasn't been too successful today. We haven't had that many people in the chat room. Hopefully we'll have a bunch of people that watch the repeat. This was inspired because of what's taking place in the media, the corporate media right now, especially here on YouTube and especially across other forms of media on the internet, where alternate voices are people who have a different opinion than the mainstream narrative that tends to lean liberal. They're being silenced, they're being shadowed, they're being darkened out of searches, and they're being restricted from the conversation. In that situation, people like me have to speak up, and I would rather this channel never be political. Okay, I like to keep my politics to myself, and as a minister, to keep it, with a group of people who, we're thinking about solutions to problems from our perspective. But in this case, I have to say something because I do have a platform on here. We've had, 45,000 views over the past year. It's necessary for me to stand up at this point and say something with the platform, considering that there are lies being told and there are people that are being harassed that are conservatives and being somewhat abused. I don't want that to happen to anyone, including Democrats and my liberal friends who we may not agree on everything, but I don't want any voices silenced when it comes to political opinions. So the idea that somehow we can shape the narrative and create a liberal agenda or a Democrat agenda or even a Republican and conservative agenda based on controlling information is draconian and evil. And it's not having the effect that I think a lot of liberals and Democrats and people in government want it to have. It's having just the opposite effect, that people are getting very angry and resentful, and they're becoming more vocal, and division is increasing. So this is number 7 is for all echo chambers, whether you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, whatever the case is. Do we really want to see what things look like? Now, bear with me on this. Do we really want to see what things look like if there are sweeping changes in Congress this fall? I'm going to say that one more time just to give me time to drink some more water. Do we really want to see what things will look like if there are sweeping changes in Congress this fall? As it stands right now, Congress flips. If Congress flips with the information we have from Democrats currently on their platform, the only agenda that I've really heard about is the fact that they want to impeach Trump. Okay, and I read this stuff all the time. Yes, they have some things with immigration, but that's more in protest to what President Trump has to say than from their own agenda. And you can go to the DNC website and you can get the general outline of what they believe and what they feel. But I'm talking about a real-time agenda. Like, what is their agenda right now for this country? How do they want to move forward? The only thing that you're hearing for Democrats and Democratic supporters is an anti-Trump hate speech. That's all we're getting. And as it stands, if Congress flips with the information we have from Democrats currently, the only agenda will be impeaching Trump. And I got to tell you, having lived through the Clinton impeachment in the 90s, it was the biggest waste of time on the American people. And I'm going to say that, yes, President Clinton made an immoral decision. It was a horrible decision. But impeachment, really? It cost the taxpayers money. And some people say that's how George Bush got in the White House, is because I'm not going to say it. Let me try to word this a different way. Because of the blight that was on the Clinton White House. And yes, that there's a lot of truth in that. And so in that way, you could say, well, see, the Republicans work. Is that really how you want to take the White House, though? I remember resenting that, thinking that I didn't want the Republicans to take the White House based on Monica Lewinsky and that whole thing. I didn't want that to happen. But that's exactly what happened. And Democrats, I'm warning you now, that those type of situations come back to bite you, because it's biting Republicans. And so if Democrats get elected this fall and we see a flip in Congress, that may not be the best thing, not for Republicans, but it's not a good thing necessarily for America. The division and strife that will follow that type of upheaval will rip this country apart. If you're a Democrat or in a liberal echo chamber, I would point conversations towards having a real-time platform in your party. At least that way there's a plan in case the Democrats do take over this fall. For conservative echo chambers, I would be willing to compromise on some rhetoric. I'm going to say that again. If you're in a conservative echo chamber, in other words, your peeps, your people that you surround yourself with, let's say they're mostly conservative, be willing to compromise not your values, not your beliefs, but some of your commentary and rhetoric about things going on around you. I don't think people realize how evil conservatives sound sometimes when it comes to things that are taking place, whether it be sporting events, whether it be things in the inner city that are happening, how insensitive and how mean that we sound sometimes to other people in the country. And you may have those opinions, you may have those beliefs, and it may be everything in you to stand up and say something, but there are some hills that you shouldn't be willing to die on. There's some things that you should be willing to go, you know what? There may be more to that story. This may be a bigger deal than I realize, and I'm going to be quiet on that one, because all you're doing is solidifying the opposition party's belief that Trump supporters are angry, ignorant, old white men. And that's not true at all. I know that, and you know that. But sometimes a little bit of kindness and a little bit of silence will go a long way. And sometimes you're just wrong. You're just wrong. And you can die on the hill all you want to and talk about how the way things should be and the way things need to be. But sometimes it's best just to be quiet and realize it may be that was that way in your generation, But now we are in a different time period, and you're hurting the next generation by running your mouth. Be quiet. Be quiet. Don't say anything. It may be that you think it looks A, B, and C, but some things really do need to change, but you can't see it because you're looking at it through a 1950s and 1960s lens. And those are some hateful things to say, but I don't mean it hateful. I'm just trying to say that this country is a tipping point at the State of the Union. We are divided. We are fighting. We are angry with each other right now. Everybody's angry. Everybody's saying mean stuff to each other. And before you can point your finger across the aisle, you have to look at each other and you have to say, hey, what are we doing wrong? And I'm going to tell you what we conservatives are doing wrong. We're hateful about some things. We're mean about some things, and we need to readjust some of the things that we act like we're willing to die for. We need to be quiet about them. And we fuel President Trump's Twitter addiction when we do this, because he really does want to, he is one of the best presidents when it comes to echoing what his own party and his own people are saying. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that like I have, but President Trump will flat out back what his people. If his people are saying one thing, President Trump goes to tweeting. He'll go to tweeting, and sometimes we would help him out just by not weighing in on certain things. Does it sound crazy? Probably does sound crazy. I am so grateful that you listened today and that you're a part of this. Again, we seem to do better on the repeats than we do the live. That's my fault, because 7 o'clock in the morning is pretty early for anybody. I want to leave you with this, is that there's hope, because there's life. And where there's life, there's hope. And so this is just a video to talk about the State of the Union that you can be watched before or after the State of the Union to compare it to what President Trump says. I'm excited about this entire week, because one thing is for sure is that there's going to be a lot of things talked about, and maybe somewhere down the line some people can shake hands and get along. I do want to reach out to my liberal and Democrat friends right now and say, guys, let's try to find some conversation. Let's sign up and do some YouTube together. Let's have a conversation that and try to game it out to where maybe our leadership can take cues from us at an individual level, getting along and not endorsing the mean and hatefulness that we see on both sides of the aisle, and try to talk to each other as best as we can. I'll probably get killed for this as far as in the YouTube algorithm if it ever gets demonetized or even gets to play. But we've got to stand up and we've got to try. I want to thank you so much for watching this morning. My name is Bill Marion, and you've been watching A Nose for Life. If you get time, be sure to check out some of our other videos, and which we have plenty in our queue. And I might be checking back in later today. Have a good morning.